All right.
All right. Well, you know what? You know what they say. We don't do small talk, so we're going to jump right in.
Let's get to it.
Okay. Today we are talking about therapy and going to therapy. And I think the reason that we're covering this subject and it is so important to both of us is because we have a lot of experience going to therapy and we're
Yeah.
such advocates for it.
Yes, definitely.
That being said, there's such a counter force that I think happens in our society where there tends to be, stigma to going to therapy, whether it's, fear of what it is, whether it's shame, whether it's just like being overwhelmed. And so I think we're here today to kind of share our experiences and we'd love our listeners to either, feel seen or share it with someone who maybe
Yeah.
is questioning therapy or just kind of that like little encouragement because I know for me personally, I would not be here figuratively or literally if it wasn't for therapy. So I'm obviously
hmm
team therapy, huge fan. Um yeah, what about your experience?
Yeah. For me, therapy was, I was a little bit late to the game, but I literally can't think of many things that like provided true clarity
Mhm.
with the tougher questions and the tougher things that we go through mentally. And it's one of those things that you go through in life and you're scared of it initially, and then
Mhm.
you experience it, and it's like, oh, it wasn't that bad,
Yeah.
right? So I feel like therapy is definitely fits that category and a much needed. Um, we just got to exercise that resource as often as
Yeah.
possible, for sure.
And I think that there's things that you encounter in life that you're surprised that therapy helps with it.
Mm,
Therapy has helped me at my job. Therapy has helped me with my relationships with my family, with my friends, with obviously my romantic partners. And it's also really helped me, learn myself, which is
hmm
obviously something that I'm really passionate about. So again, team therapy, we love
Yes,
it. But here's
all
the
day.
thing. You and I both got into therapy under pretty dire circumstances.
Yeah.
So for me, for example, I entered therapy in my mid 20s because I'd gotten married, had a panic attack, and really just was not prepared to deal with the complexities of what I was dealing with. And
hmm
so I really relied on therapy to help me through that process. And you entered therapy because
Yeah, I was trying to figure out. My partner and I were just trying to figure out if this engagement is right,
mhm,
and that's supposed to be the period where it's fun and you're wedding planning and you're looking at, cake tastings and different like styles. But we were in a mental space that was nowhere, in my opinion, near where we needed to be. So it was kind of was like, well, let's just try this
and
almost
how
last
long were
resort.
you engaged? Like how
The
long were you engaged before
yeah.
you went to therapy?
Ooh. I think we actually we decided fairly early on in the engagement that
Mhm,
couples therapy was required. We also had done it a brief little try of it before, like a
mhm,
couple years prior, where we were kind of had a little rough patch. Just and I wanted to just I had no experience in that space,
yeah,
and my partner had a lot more experience. So for me, I wanted to turn over every stone
got
and
it.
really make sure I didn't leave any regrets or anything that I didn't try.
Yeah.
And I figured like, okay, well, what's the worst that could happen? You know?
I mean, but that was you knew that something was kind of broken, and I
Yes.
obviously knew something was kind of broken. So like we reference it as like we jumped into therapy at the deep end and we're like kind of drowning. But if you're listening and you're like, well, should I try therapy? Like we recommend going to therapy and kind of like stepping in the therapy pool from
hmm
like the steps versus like diving
Yes.
in because it can be really overwhelming, especially when you're so desperate
Yeah.
to figure something out.
hmm
And so having a little of that foundation and that little bit of a tool belt to like go into maybe we don't wish anyone dire
Yeah.
circumstances, but
Definitely.
to be prepared for them, I think is only going to benefit you and the people around you.
Yeah. And dire circumstances happen. So this is really just about being equipped for what will happen to you. You will make a mistake. You will be in a point of just disparity.
Hmm.
And we want to avoid, again, getting so far down that path before we're trying to find a resource.
Yeah.
Um,
That last ditch effort feels just really, it's that desperate, like, reaching for anything energy. So,
Mhm, mhm.
and we're also, it took a while. I think we both entered therapy in our like 20s. And I would say that both of us have felt a force of like stigma when it comes to therapy. My example or my experience is that I grew up in a household, a pretty traditional Midwest household, and I didn't remember really talking about my feelings. I never referenced my mental health growing up. I
Mhm.
was not part of any conversation that I had,
Right.
not only in my, family unit, but even at school. And so for me to get to the point where the circumstances were so dire, I think the stigma that I had to break through was the stigma from my parents,
Yeah.
because they're just this is not a dialogue that they have. Like,
Mhm.
how are you feeling? How did that make you feel?
Yeah.
Talk to me about,
The
why
baby boomers were strong, right?
yeah, absolutely. The baby boomers, like, we love them. Obviously, they raised us and they did such a good job, but I don't think that mental health was on their like
Not
priority.
at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
But
And
where have you felt stigma?
yeah, I think from my end of it, it's being a male. That's the typical place where you find just we're just not even want to be a part of that conversation.
Hmm.
It's something that is rarely, as men, we rarely, I think, exercise our vulnerability, kind of
Hmm.
like our muscle there. So if we're rarely exercising it, the chances of us actually engaging in that practice are just very low. And then we're not amongst our friends talking about, so, hey, let me tell y'all what I had to go through, or my therapist told me last week. Like, that's never a part of conversation. We are not bringing that up before we watch the game,
Yeah.
after we watch the game, none of that. And it's just like an ego thing. We want to seem strong and we can bear things on our shoulders. And unfortunately, having open, honest discussions seems or fits in the category of like weakness and
Yeah.
something that we don't want to. We're just not equipped in that space, so we disregard.
What percentage of your male friends go to therapy or have gone, I guess?
Less than 10%
Okay,
for
we got to
sure.
get that number up. I would
For
say
sure.
that the vast majority of my inner circle, um, female for sure, I would say 90% of my female friends have gone or are currently in therapy.
90%.
90. I'm rolling with a thoughtful crew
Yeah, you got
here.
a thoughtful crew.
Yeah.
Shoot, I would, just make a naive guess. I'm sure that's pretty might be accurate in terms of we just did like a sample size of
Yeah.
the general public.
I mean, I don't think it's 90% women that go to therapy. I think it's
Yeah.
much lower. But
Mm.
it also reminds me, we've obviously talked about dating before. We've talked about like height preferences, but there's this meme that it says like therapy is the new 6'4", which I
Mhm.
totally agree. Like, I think
Yeah.
on dating apps it should be like, can I get a permission slip from your therapist?
Yeah. You know what's funny about that? I remember seeing that on a couple profiles. Green flags I look for was the
Yes,
prompt. Have been to or in therapy. It's like,
absolutely.
wow, it's seeped into the dating world, and it's people are just putting that out there as this is something that I'm interested in and we're gonna have a discussion about it. So whether you've been to it or not,
Hmm.
kind of be ready.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just to continue with like the stigma that I felt with my family, like when I was going through my divorce and I was in therapy, um, one of the things that was really important for me was to include my parents on that journey. It was something that I really wanted. And so after I got divorced, I was in therapy and I had asked, my parents are divorced and remarried. So I have four parents.
Mm.
And I asked all four parents to individually go with me in a session with just that parent,
Yeah.
me and that parent. And only one parent of mine went.
Dang.
Yeah.
So they all ran for the hills.
So that's like kind of the stigma. And I think, I've been in therapy on and off for a little over a decade now. And, it's still a conversation that I have to tread lightly on with my family, and really advocate for it, because I do think it's, especially
Mhm.
the boomer generation, like, it might just be something that they're just not familiar with. So we're here to break it down.
Yeah, and I think, well, for what would you say was the common kind of theme in the no's? Like, why did you feel like they were not interested in therapy?
Yeah, I think fear
They were
really
just like,
drove a lot of the no's. because they didn't know what they were walking into. I think
Mhm.
that they were afraid of maybe feeling like ambushed. They
Mhm.
were afraid of maybe that like the therapist would be on my side or like my
Mhm.
loyalty, which if that's the case, that's not a good therapist,
Right. Find a
period.
new one.
But yeah, I think fear was really the driving factor in not participating in that. So,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I'm okay with that now. I've come to terms with this is my journey and it's something that I need,
Yeah.
and that's okay too. And I hopefully have learned enough skills and boundaries in my time in therapy now that it does affect positively my relationships with my parents, regardless of if we've gone to therapy or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And I think that kind of just gets into, why is therapy important? If
Yeah.
you wanted to just open up a forum on
If
like,
that wasn't a paid promotion for therapy already, I don't know
right?
what is. But
Holla at me,
yeah.
somebody, some MD, some one of them online platforms. But I think I'll kind of speak from my end. For me, I think therapy is important for a few different reasons.
Mhm.
It plays a role in your overall health, right? And
Mhm.
I think now mental health is becoming a more common part of the discussion. Um, through just we see it in more social media. Folks are writing books on it. There's podcasts about it. But I think it was Charlemagne that actually mentioned the way he framed it was very insightful for me. It was like you break a bone, you go to a doctor.
Mhm.
Toothache, you go to a dentist.
Yep.
Well, if your mind hurts, there's a place that you can go. There's a resource
Mhm.
for that. Whereas we just want to continue to walk around like we're not in pain and we're not have any problems that we're dealing with. So I think just awareness of therapy and mental health plays a role in how your whole being is, and it's very important to realize that.
Absolutely. And I think it also, especially males, I love that you're kind of speaking to that sector. But if you even expand it outward and you just look at it as like a human being, like being a human is really tough. Like we were both born and it didn't come with an instruction manual.
All right.
And this is our first time in our heads and our bodies. And there's complicated situations. There is things that we go through in childhood, there are traumas that we endure, there's societal pressures and stress. I
Yeah.
mean, we're dealing with like a capitalist society and there's a
Hmm.
lot of things that are going on and it's can be really really overwhelming.
Hmm.
And that's why I think therapy is so important is because it's a professional
Yeah.
who is helping you navigate and just decipher the intricacies of being a human.
Hmm.
And I think if you have like one iota of awareness, you realize that you are dealing with a lot.
Hmm.
And that's why I love therapy is because it's such an intentional act to like take that time out of your day and say like this is a priority. I'm taking care of myself
Hmm.
and then I'm going to show up better.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Exactly. And
that's why I love it.
it's great. And for me, I think just to add to that, um, the importance of it is also to we're generations move together, right? So if we can do everything in our power to in our friend group make it a more common thing. I was telling actually my younger cousins about therapy. um, just make it a more part of conversation
Mhm.
so that it doesn't seem like something that's very it's like scary to approach just
Yeah.
because you don't feel comfortable with it or just because you don't have all the resources at that time. And we'll share at the end kind of some tips and things when you're getting ready for that point,
Mhm.
what to really start looking for. But I think a lot of this and what we kind of talked about is, our experiences, but
Mhm.
there's also couples therapy,
Mhm.
right? And when
Mm.
you,
Couples therapy is
hey,
juicy.
when I tell you, like, best way for me to put it, and I'm an athlete, so I'll kind of speak from an athletic background. It's, it's, you're in a game or you're in a competition, so to speak, but there's a referee, right, in the
Mhm.
middle to really help mediate, um, and really make sure that each party is understanding what's going on here.
Mhm.
Um, Communication is like a two-way street, and being able to like not only say what you want to say, but like listen,
Mhm.
very very important.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I had the experience through the engagement to really help us navigate that space when it comes to couples therapy, and that's really where it's also a nice, especially from a male perspective, where you feel like you're just going to get ready for an argument. Uh, you may be quote unquote in an argument, but at least that argument will have a neutral third party to
Referee. I
help
love
you,
that
like,
analogy.
yeah, like, that was a little foulish right there. It was a little
That
out
was
of
below the
bounds. That was
belt.
like,
That
yeah,
was
throw the
chopping.
flag, you know. Chopping. Look
Hey.
at you. Okay, somebody's been paying attention to football. I like it. I
I'm a
like it.
football girly.
Yeah. So listening, like, I think, is a skill set that, fortunately for me, I have, or I'm getting a lot better at, and a lot of my friends have told me that part of the reason why they bring things to my attention is they feel like it'll be heard.
Mhm.
But you're not just born a great listener. I don't
No.
think. I think it's a skill that you have to practice.
Yeah.
And when a therapist, when you present a situation to a therapist and they say, you know, George, your partner just said, you know, blah blah blah.
My
Well,
feelings are hurt when
yeah.
you
Exactly. And
don't
then, like,
come home on
interpret that.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. And then now you're on the spot. It's like, oh shoot, my partner just went on a 1 minute like explanation of that situation.
Mhm.
Therapist has now asked me, okay, George, what was your interpretation, or what was just said? Now you get to, like, test your partner and be like, oh, do they listen, or do they only listen to the positive things that I say or the negative things that I say? And then you can just be a better communicator, I think, after the fact,
Yeah.
because you know how your partner is listening to you.
I mean, I think what's so important about that example is that it shows you the dynamics and the intricacies of what communication is.
Yeah.
So I might say something and you might process it or hear it differently because you have your own set of lenses of experiences that you're passing that through.
Yeah.
And that's what I think especially is important about couples therapy is it helps you get better at your communication skills. And I think sometimes when you get into couples therapy, it is that dire circumstance.
Mhm.
I personally don't know a lot of couples who are like, we are doing great, but we are going to go to couples therapy.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah. That's true. I mean, when everything's going smooth, you're like, why would that come into mind, right?
yeah,
I'm sure instant rebuttal will be like, well, everything's cool. Like,
Yeah.
do I have a reason to worry?
right.
Right? Is there something going on?
Yeah.
Are you about to drop a bomb on me or something like that?
And I mean, obviously we both entered couples therapy when things were dire circumstances, but I think it helped me it got me on the path of understanding what communication really is.
Mhm.
And I think at this point I am a good communicator, but I truly think that I can always get better. It's one of
Yeah.
those things that you never stop growing and learning at.
Mhm.
And again, it trickles out into everything. I mean, the way that I communicate in a meeting with my coworkers is a great example of like, I think that I'm saying something
Mhm.
and I probably could get better at saying that and provide, actionable feedback or,
Yeah.
things that I need post this meeting. So that communication I think is really important. I also think from like a couples therapy perspective, I think just taking that time out and saying we're committed as a couple, we're willing to go into this experience and say we're focusing on our relationship and we both want to improve it
Yeah.
is something really beautiful. I think our lives are filled with distractions and I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah.
Like when you're at home
Mhm.
and you're having the same argument on
Over
the
and
same
over.
couch
Yeah.
and it follows the same pattern, you really like to your referee point, which I love that analogy. It's
Mhm.
like having an unbiased person. And I will say, couples therapy, you both should absolutely feel safe and heard by the therapist.
Yeah.
Like if the therapist ever points out, like, oh, you're the bad guy. No, that's not a good
Yeah.
the therapist. But like that space is just a way to not only hear
Mhm.
your partner, but communicate better with them. And that's why I think couples therapy is so great too.
Yeah. And I think part of the frustration with you're in the same space having the same argument, it quote unquote like leads to the same result,
Mhm.
which is unresolved, right?
So true.
So if we're gonna have an argument
Mhm.
and we're gonna do it in couples therapy, when we get done with that argument, we'll have like maybe some homework.
Yeah.
Maybe Maybe I'll actually have listened to a part of your phrase or your speech or whatever you're trying to get across that I wasn't paying attention to when we were just you and I arguing, right? Because again, that therapist can ask again like very straight up questions like, George, what did you just hear?
Yeah.
Or tell me how that statement made you feel. And then it's like, okay, if I tell you that when you mention X, Y, and Z, I feel sad, I feel unheard, I feel unwanted. Now you have that in your toolbox to when and if we get into another argument, you know, hey, don't say these 3, 4 things. Or if you're going to say it, you
Yeah.
know now that that's going to make me feel some type of way.
Yeah. You know what the
So
consequences are.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Just again, heightening that awareness about how you and your partner just move through this world. I think, like you said, just that's what I think that's that's like the ultimate sign of, hey, I'm trying to see you. I'm
Mhm.
trying to make this better.
Mhm.
And there are things that I have to get better at. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the situation.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's an acknowledgement that there is work to be done. No one is necessarily at fault.
No one's at
Right.
fault.
We're both trying to solve the problem.
All 3 of those people in the room have the same end goal, and that is for a
Yeah.
healthier relationship.
True.
And I think that that's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I will say, like, I went to couples therapy, and I don't want the punchline to be, unfortunately, that relationship didn't work out, because I really don't think that's actually the truth. I think that couples therapy really empowered us to make the right decision for each of us. I was
Mhm.
already married, and we quickly realized that we probably were headed in different directions. And I don't think without therapy, we really would have been solid in our understanding of why that was the case.
Mm.
And I think, I've said on a previous episode, my divorce was really amicable.
Yeah.
And I think it's because through therapy, we really were able to truly see who each person was
Mhm.
and not despise them.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't despise him for the dreams and plans that he had for his life. And I think that he didn't despise me either. There really became this like peace and understanding.
Mhm.
And what I don't want to have happen is listeners think, oh, I'm going to go to couples therapy and split up,
Yeah.
because that is not the case.
Yeah. That's not the case. And it's not the goal.
It's not the
Right?
goal.
You don't walk into therapy like, hey, we want to break up. We just want your cosign. And if you're going into that with that energy, like you got bigger issues, I feel like.
Yeah.
But even then, when it like again, the solution in some cases may be to split. But I think again, the goal is how do we communicate here? How do we put this puzzle together and make each party feel heard, seen?
Mhm.
And then it's like, make the decision based off of that, not off of the circular arguments
Mhm.
or the fears or the frustrations and things that get you to that dire state.
Mhm.
Because when you make decisions based off that, like, you'll tend to probably make the wrong ones, right?
Well, I have to ask you this.
Yes.
I'm putting you on the spot. You get into a relationship now,
hmm
okay? And are you
Shout out my future girl, by the way.
Yeah, she sounds hot. I'm sure she's very lovely. I can't wait to meet her. But are you going to therapy? When are you bringing that up? What does that look like to you?
Mm. First of all, that's a great question. And my immediate thought is yes, therapy doesn't have to be a part of it, but I at least want to talk about it
Mhm.
to get a feel on if it's something that my partner would be open with or open to. In terms of timing, I would say it's tough to put like a time stamp on it, but I would probably in the conversation of, hey, I really would. How would you feel about therapy? And
Mhm.
if it's receptive, then I would be like, okay, well, maybe we've been dating for like 3 months.
Mhm.
At that point, I'd pose it as like, well, let's just go try it and
Yeah.
see what happens.
Mhm.
Um, and again, I think it would be very important for me to convey that this is nothing is wrong here,
Yeah.
right? I'm not bringing this up because I'm worried, concerned. There's something that I need to quote unquote uncover. It's more, I am committed to being the best partner for you, and this is a tool that I've seen useful in my life, and I want to see if this would work for us.
I love that.
I think that's how I would approach it. Do you have like a time stamp that you would have couples therapy be a part of your new relationship?
I think that I would my future partner, shout out to my future partner too. He is hot. Um, I think before I got engaged, I think that would be a really important
hmm
milestone because as someone who's previously been married, I think that engagement period is okay, this is the tea.
Mm.
My ex-husband and I almost called off our engagement. And the reason that we didn't end our engagement is because we had put the security deposit down on the venue.
Oh shit. We done already put these bands down. We doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
At that point, it's kind of doomed. Right there.
In retrospect, you're right. But I think when you get engaged, I think the focus becomes so much on the wedding. And
yeah.
like a wedding is a logistical nightmare. Like no part of me ever wants to have a wedding again, but that's my personal opinion. But I think that engagement, like laser focus, like let's get married.
Yeah.
It really kind of it muffles all of the other stuff with the relationship that I think happens. So for me, when I'm with my future partner, I would really love to go to therapy before we got engaged so that we just do that. We're on the same path. Like we have all of those boxes checked out that we see eye to eye on something.
Yeah. I think what would be to take it a step further, what if your partner were to say, let's bake this into just our normal like flow. Let's do like 1 year check-ins. Let's do
hot
6-month check-ins. Like
hot.
Okay.
That's daddy.
I'm putting that in my pocket. Hey,
if my man said to me, "Hey, I just want to make sure that we do a little upkeep here, and we are intentional about making sure that the health of our relationship stays
on point."
That's my man. That is my man.
Hear that, fellas? So, a little
See how
nugget. I'm
easy
trying
it is?
to uncover the gems. Let's uncover these gems. Okay, so I want to share some personal stories a little bit.
I'm excited to hear
about our positive or negative kind of like impacts.
How many years have you been in therapy? Like, give me.
Ooh, okay. So if I were to because I went on therapy in like phases. So if I were to just kind of accumulate everything, I've probably been to 5 or 6 couples therapy sessions.
Okay.
And about 4 individual sessions. So
Great.
about 10 sessions.
And I will say that I didn't know you before you went to therapy, but I've spoken to you before about what an evolved man you are and your listening and your communication skills. So if you can get to that level in 10 therapy sessions, whew.
It's doable.
Yeah.
But let's not be fooled here. Those were the sessions that actually were had, right? To get to those sessions, it takes interviewing therapists, getting comfortable.
For sure.
We'll dive into some of those things later. But yeah, it's nothing that is as drastic as it seemed to be, because I think for me, I went into it with the right intentions. I think that matters as well. Because if you
were open.
Yeah. If you're open to it, if you're walking into it, kicking and screaming, then it's like, it's not really worth your time at that point because you haven't even allowed yourself to be open to.
I think that was the first question that they asked at couples therapy when I went with my ex is like, are you both open to improving the relationship? And if one person says like, nah, I'm out, like then there's no point in paying for it.
Right. $150 down the drain.
Exactly. So you both have to be open to it, or you have to be open to it to go to therapy as an individual. But okay, so obviously we have a lot of positive experiences from therapy. You were going to share some of your.
Yeah. So for I'll kind of share a couples therapy positive experience and then solo therapy experience. So with couples therapy, we've been talking about how like the tools that we gain throughout that process, right?
Mhm.
For me, it's all under the umbrella of awareness, right? Just being aware that we're all different, we all communicate in different ways, and we all listen in different ways, right? So just being aware of that fact, I think, just opened me up and allowed me to become a better person with my friends, work, just any relationship, human relationship, right?
Mhm.
Also, uh, I view myself as a pretty patient person, but there's also like empathy that you don't really get to see and experience in the day-to-day life, right? If your partner that you love is sitting on the couch or table across from you and they're pouring their heart out
Mhm.
and they're talking about things and they're crying as they're talking with a stranger right there, it's like there's this energy exchange that happens that's like, wow, okay, I see you. Time stops a little bit,
Mhm.
right? And you don't know, you can create that environment with whether it's your partner, your best friend, somebody at work that you may be have a struggling relationship with. Is like, hey, I'm going to set this time aside and I'm going to listen, and I want to know what are the hard things. Like, let's
Mhm.
actually talk about it. So just having that, like having your eyes open to that, I
Mhm.
think is very. It's for me, played a huge role in, I think, my comfort level in being in social settings, meeting new people. Um, Having deeper conversations with my mom. I mentioned kind of on prior episodes,
Yeah.
I had to tell her that, like, she some of the things and some of the ways that some of the things that she told me as I was getting raised and as she was helping me kind of navigate relationships, like, didn't serve me.
Mhm.
So I knew that would hurt her to hear, but she needed to. I had to communicate that, one, to kind of defend myself a little bit, but if you were to say 5 years later, like, George, at some point you're gonna tell your mom like that, like, I would have been like, nah, I'm gonna keep
Yeah.
that to myself because I don't want to hurt her. But little did we know, like, after we had that conversation, now, I mean, we're talking about deeper things.
Yeah.
We're joking even about relationships
She's
and
probably grown from that, which is
yeah,
so beautiful because I think that that's like those additional layers where,
mhm,
like, when you start to do the work, the people around you are
yeah,
positively impacted and hopefully it reflects onto them and then they start to see things from a different perspective. Yeah, I think that's huge.
yeah. And then just going to therapy sessions to work on myself. You can uncover some of your tendencies that don't serve you.
Mm.
So some of you may know about like defense mechanisms, and I remember there was a therapist that broke them down, the four main ones, like four horsemen or something like that. And it's two of them that I realized that I was doing, stonewalling
Mhm.
and defensive, just being defensive. So stonewalling, kind of removing yourself from the situation, like if you can imagine, oh, we're about to argue, okay, I'm gonna get up and leave the room or leave the
Mhm.
space, or I'm gonna make a scene when I leave, right? Or just being defensive. Well, why are you telling me that I do that when you do this? And
Oof. That one shuts everything down.
shut it all down. But I think
No one's recovering from that. You got to take a time out and like regroup 24 hours later
for
because
real, because we do these things,
yeah.
but we don't know that there's a name for them,
Yeah.
and we don't know that, hey, these behaviors are actually a part of a bigger scheme and a bigger, not even say scheme, but like a bigger, there's a place for these in the physical psychology of things, where it's like, hey, if you do these actions, these behaviors, it'll lead to this.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, when you look at that, oh, there's a name for that. Oh, okay, I see why the arguments keep going in circles, or I see
Mhm.
why I can't get through to one of my friends because he's a stonewall, or he one of the defense mechanisms that he uses is criticism.
Mhm.
And then I know it, I can put a name to it, and I can also help him or help her work through it, right?
It kind of makes things a little less personal when there's like a definition to something and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, this is in a curriculum or
Hmm.
like a medical journal and there's like a definition to it, it kind of is like a little reassuring
Yeah.
that you're like, okay, it's not just me or it's not just, my experience. It's like this is something that has a name and so you start to like for me, I start to empathize the person behind that action or whatever,
Yeah.
because then that for me, then it allows me to start to get curious about why those things might be happening.
Mm.
You know, in like a romantic relationship setting, you know, the way that we were raised is so important on how it reflects and how it shows up in our relationships. And
Yeah.
I think, I mean, we've talked about this at length, but one of the ways that my upbringing really shows and showed up in my romantic relationships is the relationship with my dad.
Mm.
And so my parents got married very young. They had me very quickly thereafter, and my dad left my mom when I was very young, like by the time I was 1 years old.
Wow.
And so, you know, I had divorced parents when I was an infant, and that meant that I had two families
Mhm.
for the majority of my life.
Yeah.
And, you know, there is that cliche like daddy issues kind of
Mhm.
terminology, which is a little triggering to me because in fact, in reality, there is a lot of truth to it.
Yeah.
But because my relationship with my dad was sporadic and inconsistent. I mean, it's really hard to explain to a young child that
Mhm.
you only see your dad every summer and every other major holiday.
Mm.
And, you
Mhm.
know, that's a very complex thing to understand
Yeah.
for a young child.
Yep.
And so I grew up with, you know, two parents, and I'm so fortunate because I will say, like, I have two step parents that took me on as their own. And I'm really, really lucky that I have four parents
Mm.
who loved me regardless.
Right.
That being said, that doesn't change the inconsistencies that I had with my dad when
Mhm.
I was growing up. And so that that inconsistency really created a lot of anxiety in me.
Yeah.
And how that shows up now as an adult is I identify as having an anxious attachment style. So I naturally lean on being anxious in romantic partnerships because I think the other thing that the correlation that was so important that therapy taught me
Mhm.
is my relationship with my dad is shows up in my romantic relationship with men that I'm involved with.
Mm.
And as an adult, you're trying to rectify
That wiring.
and make that relationship quote unquote right.
Yeah.
And in reality, you can't make that relationship right.
Mhm.
Like that was the relationship that I had with my dad. And so oftentimes what that looks like in my adult life now is attracting people and men who are unavailable to me or are inconsistent because
Mm.
that is familiar to me and ultimately it makes me anxious. So it's this like self-fulfilling prophecy.
Uh.
And it's been like a really vicious cycle. I would say the majority of people that I've dated have erred on the side of being unavailable or being inconsistent. And again, it's the thing that I want the least,
Mhm.
but it's
Mhm.
the thing that I'm most familiar
Familiar
with.
with. Yeah.
And so
Wow.
I am doing a lot of work to really hopefully break that cycle. And
Yeah.
I'm still working on it.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
for me, it takes away this like I choose the wrong partners. It
Yeah.
takes that pressure off myself and I'm like I have a little bit more grace and understanding
Yeah.
and I can kind of like I talk to like my younger self, my inner child.
Mm.
And inner child work is another thing that I've learned in like in individuals therapy that is like one of the best things.
Yes. Yes.
But talking to
Heavy
my
too, though.
yeah, talking to my inner child and making sure that she feels safe
Mhm.
and that, you know, she's allowed to say like this inconsistency doesn't work for me
Mhm.
and I will be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can let this go.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because I'm an adult now.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was a child, I didn't have a choice. That was the situation I needed to be in. But now as an adult, I'm allowed to say this doesn't serve me. I don't like this. I don't want this.
Mm.
Yeah. So like that was probably like my juiciest
Yeah.
nugget from therapy and like connecting those dots. is probably one of the things that I'm most grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And again, like you're aware of it now, so
Yeah.
when it does pop up again, because it's not necessarily about removing it from your life and let's get rid of this whole relationship that you have with your dad. It's like, no, it is what it is,
Hmm.
and now you can catch yourself when you're having those moments in your future relationships, and you can put it in its right category,
Hmm.
right, and not necessarily believe that oh, this is happening again. There's a bigger negative impact that it's going to have, and letting it kind of consume you. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of the issue with folks who haven't had the experience where they're working on their inner child or any childhood trauma.
Hmm.
When it comes up again, they don't have that tool set to know what to do. So the result ends up being the same or familiar.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good word that I think is important to address, especially when it comes to therapy, is like the term trauma.
Yeah.
And I think, we are obviously not professionals. Like, let's,
Yes. I do
we
not
are
have an
not,
MD.
we do not have the medical
I did
background.
take Psych 101 though.
Oh,
You
okay.
know, I think I got a B plus in that thing.
Okay.
Not
Well,
come
B
out
plus, you have some improvement. It's okay. Just kidding.
for real.
But trauma doesn't always have to be these like really bad, like catastrophic things. Those things happen and that
Mhm.
creates trauma. But like I said, I had 4 great parents and I had step parents who treated me as their own. And some people might be like, "Well, what are you complaining about?"
Mm.
Like what like
Mhm.
that's the stigma too.
Yeah.
And it's like that can be true.
Hmm.
And that inconsistency, that chaoticness, that going from household to household
Hmm.
was traumatic for me. And I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that my parents did a bad job. That doesn't mean that they're at fault for getting divorced. I'm so happy with the people that they are with, and I'm so happy that they are happy and living their full lives.
Hmm.
But that affected me.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It is my job now. I can't choose what happened to me,
Yeah.
but I can choose to do something about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how you respond to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So when folks are feeling confident in terms of, okay, I'm ready to try the therapy thing.
Yeah.
Like, where do you even start? Like, so we wanted to just kind of give you 3 things to kind of look for.
Mhm.
And also just a disclaimer, it's a process.
Mhm.
It is not a one-stop shop. Like for example, how many therapists would you say you've seen in your therapy experience?
I think I've gone to like 5 different therapists over the last 10 years. One of them was a couples therapist that I saw with my ex-husband. I actually did go to couples therapy with a boyfriend of mine as well.
Mm.
That couples therapist actually turned into my individual therapy once we broke up.
Mm.
So it was like a 2 for 1.
Nice.
Yeah, I would say that I probably have gone to 5 different therapists in my life. And the ones that I've talked to have been like within the 20s because
Mm.
I view therapy as like kind of like dating.
Yeah.
And I know that that sounds a little stressful, but if you're sharing your inner world, if you're sharing your deepest, darkest feelings, you want to be able to trust that person
Exactly.
and you want them to be good at what they do. And so, I've always requested a like 15-minute introductory call with therapists.
Yeah.
To kind of see their style and to see, what they're about and just get that vibe.
Yeah.
Like, are we vibing or not? It's with any human connection or interaction.
Yeah. That's so true.
So, that's my experience. I've interviewed quite a few and I've at different stages in my life I've chosen, 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
So just like, I mean, that's just context, right? So interviewed over 20 people, but only 5 made the cut.
Mhm.
So just to know that, you do have to go through a few,
And don't let that
options
discourage you.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because there are people that are going to give you that level of comfort and going to end up being, your go-to therapist, but it's something that you don't have to feel like the first 2 people you talk to, you have to commit to them in any type of way.
Yeah.
But I would say 3 things that I would look for. Number 1, my therapist has to be, personable, right? And for me, it's almost like a familiar kind of energy and vibe. But for me, it's a little humor too, because what we're talking about is heavy and it's deep. And it's, for example, after a therapy session, like I almost want to take a nap just because I'm so drained. And
Amen.
You know what I mean? So,
Yes.
if you're going to go through that half hour or hour session, at least have it be someone that you feel super comfortable with, that you feel like you can meet them at a party or a family function, and they're your people,
Mhm.
right? And I think the second thing for me is the style. So, I like homework and concrete things to look up
Such an
and go through.
action man.
You know what I mean? Like what okay, let's spend 30 minutes talking about philosophy and the quote unquote airy, quote unquote soft stuff, but
Yeah.
like what does this mean? What am I
Yeah.
supposed to do with this when I leave?
Uh-huh.
And for example, learning about my defense mechanisms was eye-opening. It's like, oh, I have something to look at. I'm reading this and I'm like, dang, that's exactly what I do when an argument happens, or and that's what that means.
Mhm.
And then okay, now how do I resolve that, or what are some things that I can do to avoid that in the future? So
Do you
uh,
remember like a piece of homework that you had that you did in order to
yes,
focus on that?
in individual therapy, one of my homework assignments was to uh, find something that you wrote in school, like elementary school phase.
Mhm.
So whether that be if you have any like if your parents has like a clippings of a project, or if you have any essays that you've written, just to see like how you were, because when you're writing something at that young age, it's relatively congruent with how you're actually thinking, right? You haven't had the life of distractions to taint you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like if I have to
All of
write an
that
essay,
programming.
yeah, none of that program is really sunk in yet,
Yep,
right?
yep.
So
Pure heart.
yeah,
Pure heart.
exactly.
Yeah.
So fortunate for me, I found my mom had this. I think I was in fifth grade, and it was, tell us about your next 10 years, and it
Mhm.
was like what I want to have happen. And a lot of it was, some of it actually came to fruition, but I noticed that I was talking to about myself and to myself in just nothing but pure positive energy. It was like, George, you're gonna do this, you're gonna have this happen, you're gonna live here. And I'm like, dang, like this kid was hyping me up. And
Yeah.
it's like, how am I so far from him now?
Mm.
Right. So that was like an awareness piece. But the assignment was again to find something that you wrote in your younger stages of life and just read it and sit in it. And I think that was part of the inner child work that
Yeah.
you tend to do a lot of, or at least you get asked a lot of questions in terms of how you grew up, what was your upbringing like. But that was some of the homework pieces that like, okay, I feel confident. I feel more welcome. Like, okay, what other tip you got for me that's going to make me feel a little bit better or maybe understand what's happening
Mhm.
here? And I think the third thing for me is the place has to be comfortable. Like it has to be a vibe.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in a place with no windows, or
Yeah.
like the couches that are uncomfortable,
Mhm.
or it's the therapist has to make it an effort. In couples therapy, for example, I'll never forget the therapist. I think she had like these like flowers or like plants, and she
Mhm.
and she was asking like, is it too much, should I move one over here?
Oh,
And
cute.
she was trying to set the stage,
Yeah.
as opposed to sit down, you sit there, I sit here,
Mhm.
pen and pad ready to go. It's like,
Yeah.
let me ask you some questions to make sure you're comfortable. Is the light too bright? Should I dim it down? And then once you feel comfortable in that space, then you're comfortable in the discussions, and then you're comfortable to release a little bit more.
Yeah.
So those would be the top three things for me. How
I think
about you?
that space part is so important. I'm a big spatial person. My
Hmm.
environment needs to be really comfortable. I mean, one, I always need tissue because you know me, I'm a crier.
Yep,
I
yep.
always need to have that box of tissue, but it should feel like you're in a close friend's living room.
Yeah.
It should feel like this is a place that I can feel safe. This is
Hmm.
a place that I can like let my guard down.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel that, be empowered to say this just isn't right for me. And
Hmm.
that's okay too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so my top 3 are, well, one, I have actually a question because the first tip that I have of things that I look for in a therapist, I will only go to women therapists for individual therapy.
Solo therapy. Okay. Got it.
I think that there's things that you go through as a woman
Hmm.
that it would be very hard for a man to relate to.
Yeah.
And as I'm talking through some of the really personal things that I've gone through in my life, I need to have that. I can't have that barrier of like me trying to explain the woman experience. Like that's
Mm.
just, I don't have time
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
I don't have energy for that. Like,
Yeah.
but I will say that I would be open to going to a male therapist if it was the right fit for couples therapy. So
Mhm.
I'm not, I mean, I'm team woman, but like, open
Yeah,
to.
makes sense.
But what about you? Like for your therapy
Couple
sessions?
therapists. It was women primarily,
Uh-huh.
but I did have two men. And what I noticed with the men was they had stories that I could relate to,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they also had the same kind of struggles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Were
if
they
I s-
black men therapists?
no,
Okay.
actually, I was looking though.
Yeah, I'm
I
sure.
was trying to
That's probably really
find like an
important.
umbrella, and that's definitely, as I'm kind of still in my journey to find a consistent therapist. Like, yeah, that's something that's high on my list because there's just that comfort level that I think you're getting at in terms of you're talking to somebody who looks like you, feels like you,
Yes.
who they can see themselves in you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that just adds an extra layer um, of trying to solve that problem together,
Mm-hmm.
and being concrete and real in your communication as
Yeah.
well. I think that's huge.
Yeah. So I look for if I'm looking for a new therapist in the individual sector, I'm looking for a
Mhm.
woman. The second thing that I'm looking for, and like I said, I've been to 10 years of therapy, so I've gone through a little learning curve of all of the different types of therapy. There are
Yeah,
like a lot of different.
there is.
There's a lot of different categories. You know, traditional talk therapy is kind of the introductory one I think most people are familiar with.
Hmm.
But I was introduced to this thing called EMDR through my second therapist that I ever went to, and it's like bilateral movement. And what that allows you to do is kind of dig deeper into your subconscious.
Hmm.
And I was really dealing with some of the trauma healing that I kind of spoke to.
Yeah,
And it's something that some people it works for, some people it doesn't, some people just don't, gravitate towards it or feel like they want to do it. But every time now I've looked for a therapist because I moved from Minnesota, so I needed to find a therapist in
hmm,
California.
hmm,
I made sure that my therapist in California had the ability to do EMDR
okay,
because that was really important for me. I knew that I would need that in my continued
yeah,
journey.
yeah,
So like when you find modalities that, work for you or you're interested in what they are, like a quick Google search could obviously guide
yeah,
you
yeah.
along. But yeah, modalities is like one of the sections that I look for as I'm going through therapists.
Hmm.
And then the third is this will not surprise you. This
What you
will
got?
absolutely not surprise you. As we've done a episode on masculine and feminine energies because
Ah,
we love balance, but I need the communication style is what I need. And
hmm,
the type of communication that I need is soft and strong. So,
balance.
balance. I need someone who's going to be a little bit more soothing and comforting. You know
Mhm.
me, I get a little sensy. We were actually talking about this earlier today.
Yes, yes.
Like I can
She
throw
can
out
dish
this
it, but she can't take it.
I can dish it. I throw zingers at you all the time, and you're such a good champ. But like, don't criticize me. Maybe that's probably something I should explore in therapy.
I think you should bring that up.
Yeah.
I can help you. If you want to invite me to that session, I'll I'll let them know.
Oh my gosh, that'd be such a good episode. We should have
Oh
a
yeah,
therapist in here.
it's a good idea. Okay.
But I need someone who's going to be, reassuring and be empathetic to like the human experience. I'm already really, really hard on myself. I'm
Hmm.
very critical, which again is something that I'm trying to work on. But like, I feel like I already beat myself up,
Yeah. Hmm.
And then, that being said, I'm a very action oriented person as well.
Hmm.
I want to be directly told, if they identify something or a piece of homework. So I really need that balance of
Mm.
soft and strong. And the way that I really, now that I know this, when I'm interviewing therapists, it's like, how are they communicating with me?
Yeah.
What is their style?
Hmm.
And you really start to pick up on, I know that this works for me, this doesn't work for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, like those are my things that I look for now.
Yeah. And you know, for me, as I think about it, what are two like online either platforms or like search tools that you found to be helpful to at least get started?
Yeah, that's really interesting they bring it up because actually the last therapist that I've saw
Hmm.
was all virtual. And so we
Virtual
virtual
therapy.
therapy.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, I think the pandemic really,
Yeah.
our mental health for sure was impacted.
Yeah.
So, that offers a lot more flexibility. I think that if and when I needed a therapist now, I would look to go back to that in-person thing because I think
Hmm.
you're right. I think that this space is so important, and I'm so flippin' sick of staring at my computer screen.
Yeah, I mean, because if you're sitting there trying to have a virtual conversation and your phone's right next to you and you're kind of looking at the
Yeah.
text and you're getting back to the conversation,
I have emails popping up,
yeah, it's
and
tough to
I try to
really.
turn it all off, but it's, it's just life.
We're not wired that way anymore.
Yeah.
And just again, it's having us because it's also that time. You
Mhm.
set aside 30 minutes or an hour,
Mhm.
put the phones down, you're looking at somebody, you're engaged in that space. You kind of respect it more,
Yeah.
But again, therapy, however you can get it, however you want to start that
Yeah, my
path, I
2
think.
resources are the first therapist I ever found was from psychologytoday.com.
Okay.
I was in my hotel room in San Francisco post-panic attack, and I was like, "I need therapy. How do
Yeah.
I find a therapist?" And they have, like, this really beautiful this is, like, not sponsored. I feel
Yeah.
so cool saying that, but I just want everyone to be very clear this is not sponsored. But Psychology Today, and they have this, like, filter for therapists, and then there's this great, platform called I think it's like called Try Frame or like Frame Therapy, and that's actually where I found my current therapist, and they do a
Okay.
really good job. I really like the way that they broke down the modalities, so it was very easy for me to find someone that was synergistic with what I was looking for. But those are my 2 resources,
Hmm.
but like I said, Google is
Yeah.
your friend, and also referrals. I think like if you have a friend who you admire
Hmm.
and you have either seen growth or you aspire to be like them, who are they going to?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's the perfect way to go about it. But I think the bigger thing that at least I want to get across is this is one of those um, things in life where it seems daunting, but
Mhm.
again, once you try it, it's like, oh, it's not that bad. So get to the other side of it. I think it's going to be very crucial for just our development moving forward.
Mhm.
And I'm really really glad that I've gone through therapy because I cannot imagine me still having those same mental blocks.
Mhm.
Not that the work is ever done,
Mhm.
but again, at least we're aware and we're able to, I think, navigate life a little bit easier. Kind of having those tools in our belt.
I totally agree. I'm so glad we had this conversation. And if this conversation helps one person, I think we'll
I'll
feel
take it.
yeah, I think
I
we'll
will
feel
take
good
it.
about it. So, and I'm glad that we can use our experiences because I think that's how this like snowball effect
Hmm.
happens.
Hmm.
Like I help you, you help me, we all get better. So,
Exactly. Exactly. But no,
amazing.
this was a great
Yeah.
conversation.
I appreciate you.
I appreciate
Go
you.
to therapy, everyone.
Get to it.
Peace.